Hello and welcome to the Remote Revolution, a podcast by Virtual Mojo. This is where we explore how modern businesses are transforming the way they work through remote teams, virtual support, and smarter operational strategies. In each episode, we bring you insights, conversations, and practical ideas to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and growing companies build efficient, scalable, and future-ready organizations. If you're looking to work smarter, scale faster, and unlock the power of remote talent, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 25 of The Remote Revolution, with your host Aneeq and Umaima as our guest. Today, we're examining a case study on moving insurance verification and billing support to a remote model. We'll explore what changed during the first 90 days, how remote support helped reduce administrative bottlenecks, and the workflow improvements that led to greater efficiency and consistency. And, listen, if you walk into most healthcare offices right now, you see this beautiful, calm waiting room up front, right?
The fish tank, the soft music.
Exactly, the whole facade. But the back office is, it is quite literally on fire. You have these highly trained staff just throwing themselves at deeply inefficient workflows.
Oh, completely. It's organized chaos.
Yeah, they're trying to mask a structurally broken system with just, sheer human effort. It's basically the operational equivalent of trying to put out a house fire by hiring more people to just stand around and scream at it.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it. And it's a painful reality for a lot of people listening. It happens because, honestly, healthcare administrators often completely misdiagnose the problem.
Do you think it's a staffing issue?
Exactly. They think, oh, we need more bodies. But the mission of our deep dive today, what we really want to unpack for you, is how this case study exposes a pretty controversial truth. Fixing those hidden background operations, it does not require hiring more expensive local staff.
Which is usually everyone's first instinct, right?
Always. But it actually requires ripping the process out of the physical office entirely. So we're going to look at how one struggling practice just completely rebuilt their sanity and their financial performance by moving non-clinical tasks remote.
And we're going to give you some highly actionable things to try if your own operations feel like they're just, drowning.
Yeah, real practical steps, because you can fix this without disrupting patient care at all.
Right. But to really appreciate this solution, we have to talk about the before state, the illusion of operating normally. Because on paper, this specific medical practice, it looked perfectly fine.
Oh, totally. If you just glanced at their high-level quarterly metrics, you wouldn't ring an alarm bell at all.
Yeah, they had steady patient volume coming through the doors, the lights were on, the claims were, eventually getting paid.
Eventually being the key word there.
Exactly. But okay, let's unpack this, because the data underneath those high-level metrics told a completely different story, didn't it?
A terrifying story, honestly. The administrative workload, the sheer volume of paperwork, the phone calls, the data entry, just to process one single patient. It was growing at a rate that just completely outpaced the actual patient volume.
So the administrative burden is exploding while the patient count is just, holding steady.
Yeah, exactly. Admin workflows were growing way faster than the actual revenue-generating visits.
I want to visualize this for a second, because we've all been in a medical waiting room and felt that sort of weird underlying tension. Imagine walking into a really busy restaurant.
Okay.
And the host, who smiles and seats you at your table, is also simultaneously having to frantically run back to the kitchen to wash dishes.
Right, dropping the menus and sprinting to the sink.
Yeah, and then they're sprinting back to the front register to process this really complicated credit card transaction that just keeps declining. That is effectively what this practice was doing to its front office staff.
It's a great analogy because the symptoms of that cascading failure, they are so obvious once you actually look at the daily friction. You had front desk staff trying to juggle, empathetic, warm interactions with sick patients.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Exactly. While simultaneously managing endless insurance eligibility checks in the background.
Let's actually define that really quickly for anyone who might be listening outside the medical billing space. An eligibility check is basically making sure the patient's insurance policy is active and covers the specific visit before they sit down with the doctor, right?
Correct. And it sounds super simple, but in reality, it often involves navigating these terrible, outdated insurance web portals.
Or fax machines, probably.
Oh, don't even get me started on the faxes. Yeah. Or sitting on hold with a provider for an hour. So you have a staff member doing that while also fielding phone calls, coordinating billing follow-ups, and dealing with constant, relentless interruptions from other people in the office.
Right, because you physically cannot be present and empathetic to a patient standing 2 feet in front of you when you've been listening to hold music from Blue Cross for 45 minutes on one earpiece.
You can't. The human brain just doesn't work that way.
It's impossible.
And the research completely backs that up. Context switching just destroys efficiency. Every single time a staff member had to pivot from a patient conversation back to a complex billing code, it took them time to reorient.
So they're just losing minutes every hour to that mental pivot.
Exactly. And because of that constant switching, the verification queues just kept getting longer and longer. Errors skyrocketed. And the leadership team finally hit a wall. They realized their team was stretched so incredibly thin that just hiring another person to sit at that chaotic front desk, it wasn't going to stop the bleeding.
Right. Which brings us to the first major turning point in the case study. And this is a massive takeaway if you are listening to this and taking notes for your own business. Step 1 is literally stop hiring.
Yes. Do not hire into a broken system.
It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of doing what every other panic practice does, which is, blindly hiring more chaotic dishwashers, leadership actually hit pause. And they audited the workflow.
And that audit, it was incredibly revealing because they forced themselves to look at the tasks, not the job titles.
Oh, that's an interesting decision.
Yeah, it's huge. They mapped out the entire life cycle of a patient visit, just step by agonizing step. And what they identified were highly repeatable operational functions that required zero clinical expertise.
Like none at all.
None. And absolutely zero face-to-face interaction. So we're talking about those eligibility checks, the benefits verification, reviewing documents, checking the status of claims.
Basically all the billing coordination.
Exactly. All this stuff that happens behind the screen.
Okay, but I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second. Because if I am a practice manager listening to this right now, my blood pressure just spiked.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right. Because I hear you saying, hey, let's take our most critical patient data, our lifeblood billing processes, and let's just move them offsite to a remote worker.
It sounds scary.
It sounds like a recipe for a massive HIPAA breach, like a complete loss of accountability, dropped balls everywhere because someone is processing my claims on an unsecure Wi-Fi connection at a Starbucks.
And your reaction is the exact same reaction the leadership team in the case study had. I mean, healthcare operations obviously depend heavily on privacy and accuracy.
Yeah, the stakes are really high.
But what's fascinating here is that they had to face a very uncomfortable reality about their current state. Their local in-office workflow was already dropping balls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were actually already violating privacy by having staff discuss sensitive billing issues in a crowded reception area where anyone could hear them.
Wait, that is such a fair point. We've all overheard things we shouldn't have in a waiting room.
Exactly. But furthermore, moving a bad workflow to a remote environment, it does not solve the problem. It simply relocates the confusion. You're just putting the exact same problem on a Zoom call.
Right, confusion in a different zip code.
Exactly. So to mitigate those security and accountability fears, leadership realized that the systems had to precede the move. They couldn't transition a single task until the workflow for that task was so clearly defined and the software access was so locked down that anyone following the manual could execute it securely.
Oh, okay. But so how do they actually do that? Because, documenting workflows, that's one of those really generic corporate phrases that sounds amazing in a boardroom.
But it's a total nightmare to execute.
Right. Because people's jobs are full of unwritten rules. Like someone knows, oh, if it's this specific insurance provider, you actually have to hit refresh twice on the portal or the whole thing glitches and deletes the claim. How on earth do you capture that kind of institutional memory?
Okay, so this is a highly actionable strategy, a real thing to try for the listener. They didn't just hand the staff blank Word documents and say, hey, write down what you do.
Because nobody would do it.
Nobody has time for that. Instead, they used screen recording software. They had their best in-office staff just record their screens while narrating their thought process as they processed a complex claim.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. The remote team then used those exact videos to build their own step-by-step written checklists. And if a remote worker got stuck while following the checklist, it usually meant an unwritten rule was missing from the video.
You are literally recording the ghost knowledge that only lives in one employee's head. That is so smart.
It works incredibly well.
So, okay, they have the manuals written, the virtual private networks are fully locked down for security, and they hit the launch button on this whole new remote model. But I imagine day one is not just a seamless magical transition where the clouds part and the money rolls in?
Oh, definitely not. The first 30 days were pure friction.
Just a mess.
Pretty much. And this is the period where most organizations panic and they pull the plug because there are absolutely no quick wins. During that first month, it was entirely about stabilization. The remote staff was moving slowly because they were hyper-focused on following the new rigid documentation. They were basically discovering all the little gaps in those screen-recorded manuals.
Right. Give me an example of the kind of friction they hit early on, like what broke?
Communication lag was definitely the biggest one. When you move to a remote support model, you start relying heavily on asynchronous work.
Meaning, for the listener, you're collaborating without needing to be online and communicating at the exact same second. Like, you leave a note, and I read it 5 minutes later when I'm ready.
Right. But the in-office team was absolutely not used to that. So if a remote worker left a digital flag on a patient file saying like, hey, I need a copy of the secondary insurance card, the in-office staff might not even see it for 3 hours.
Because they're used to
Because they were used to someone just tapping them on the shoulder to ask for it. So it caused all these early delays. Month 1 was not about speed at all. It was just establishing a baseline, building the structural integrity of the system, and frankly, forcing the local team to actually check their digital dashboards.
You're just trying to keep the ship from sinking while you swap out the engine.
Oh, exactly.
But if month 1 is just pure survival mode, when does the practice actually start seeing a return on this operational investment? Because the sources point to a major shift around the second month.
Yeah, so by days 31 to 60, that's when the training wheels really came off.
Here's where it gets really interesting, folks.
The remote staff had the workflows down to muscle memory at this point. They were no longer asking for permission or clarification on every little thing. They were operating completely independently and fully owning the verification process.
I think a really good way to visualize this is to go back to our restaurant analogy for a second. What they effectively built was a cloud kitchen, or a prep kitchen, right? The remote team is completely off-site, quietly and perfectly, chopping all the onions, making the sauces, doing all the prep work in the background. So by the time the patient walks in the door, the front office staff, who are the chefs in this scenario, they just have to plate the meal and present it beautifully.
That analogy is so spot on. The workload distribution completely inverted because the remote team wasn't being interrupted by ringing phones or, patients asking for directions to the restroom.
All of the typical office chaos.
Exactly. Their turnaround times on billing tasks sped up dramatically. And because the back-end work was suddenly being handled quietly, all those administrative interruptions for the in-office staff basically vanished.
Wow.
The front desk team finally had the mental bandwidth to just look at the human being standing in front of them and provide actual care.
Which is what they went into healthcare to do. But I'm looking at the data for month 3, so days 61 to 90, and it's kind of strange because the actual speed of processing a single claim didn't continue to increase exponentially. It sort of leveled off, yet the practice's overall revenue stabilized, and the administrative bottlenecks plummeted. So why did the overall system drastically improve if the individual tasks weren't getting done faster and faster?
Because you always reach a ceiling on speed. But the true value of a dedicated remote team isn't speed, it's consistency. Consistency breeds predictability, and predictability is what actually saves a business.
Okay, explain the mechanics of that. How does consistency outvalue speed when you're dealing with cash flow? I feel like everyone just wants things done faster.
Well, let's look at a key metric they tracked. First pass claim acceptance. For those unfamiliar, this means a medical claim is submitted to the insurance company and accepted on the very first try, without being bounced back for a missing code or a typo.
Right, it doesn't get kicked back requiring someone to spend another 45 minutes fixing it.
Exactly. When your local staff is rushing to submit claims between patient visits, they make mistakes. The claim might go out the door really fast, but it gets denied, which delays the payment by weeks.
Oh man, so fast but wrong.
Fast but wrong. But by month 3, the remote team wasn't necessarily submitting claims at lightning speed. They were submitting them with near perfect accuracy because they had dedicated focus. The first pass acceptance rate soared.
That makes total sense.
When your workflows are completely predictable, you eliminate all those operational surprises. You can actually forecast your cash flow accurately. Speed might get a sloppy claim out today, but consistency ensures that no claim ever falls through the cracks and dies in some rejection queue.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But to achieve that level of flawless consistency, those two teams the prep kitchen and the front of house, they have to be in total sync. Which brings us to this really fascinating paradox in the case study. Because you would logically think that taking a team that used to sit in the exact same room and moving half of them off-site would completely fracture their communication.
You would think so.
But the sources show it did the exact opposite.
It did. It is a brilliant operational paradox. The transition to remote support actually forced the practice to communicate better because it stripped away the illusion of communication.
The illusion.
Yeah. When everyone is in the same physical office, you rely on incredibly sloppy habits. You shout a question across the room, you leave a cryptic sticky note on someone's monitor.
Oh, I'm so guilty of the sticky notes.
We all are. You rely on the fact that you can just grab someone if you need something.
Like, hey, did you run the eligibility for the 2 p.m. appointment? Just literally yelling it down the hallway as you walk to the break room.
Exactly that. It feels like communication, but it's totally untrackable, and it's highly prone to error. Moving remote exposed those weaknesses instantly. It forced leadership to implement rigid, standardized communication protocols.
Okay, what did those protocols actually look like in practice? Give me something tangible that someone listening could try this week.
Sure. First, they utilized their existing practice management software the way it was actually designed to be used. Instead of sticky notes, every single piece of missing information had to be formally tagged in the patient's digital file.
No exception.
No exceptions. Second, instead of random shoulder taps, they implemented a strict 10-minute triage huddle on Microsoft Teams every single morning.
I love a good huddle.
It's so effective. The remote team would flag, say, the 3 files they were stuck on. The local team would provide the answers right then and there, and then they would disconnect and just execute for the rest of the day. They also created specific digital channels, like a dedicated Slack thread, just for complex coding queries, so the information was searchable later.
That is huge. So remote work didn't create a communication problem. It just illuminated the fact that their previous communication was already terrible.
Correct. And that brings us right to the ultimate controversy when managers push back on these remote models: quality control.
Oh yeah. How on earth do you manage a team and ensure quality when you can't walk past their desk and physically see what they're typing?
Right.
Because if I'm an old school manager, my anxiety is that they're sitting on their couch watching Netflix and just occasionally wiggling their mouse so they look active on Teams.
Okay, we have to drop a bit of a controversial truth bomb here. We have to face a very uncomfortable reality about modern management. Quality is not maintained by physically watching people sit at desks.
Say it louder.
It is an illusion of control. You might see them typing furiously in the office, but you don't actually know if they're typing a highly accurate insurance claim or a very passionate Reddit post.
Right. So how did this practice actually audit the remote workers without just painfully micromanaging them?
They shifted from measuring optics to measuring output. Quality is maintained through objective performance dashboards, error rate tracking, and rigorous audits of the final product.
Not the process, the product.
Exactly. The software they used allowed managers to pull a weekly report showing exactly how many verifications a specific remote worker completed, and way more importantly, what their error rate was.
So if a remote worker processes 50 claims and 49 of them achieve first pass acceptance, does it really matter if they did it at 2 p.m. or 8 p.m.?
No.
Does it matter if they were wearing sweatpants 500 miles away?
It shouldn't. If you measure objective results, physical presence becomes completely irrelevant for these types of back-end administrative tasks. The practice maintained high quality because they stopped judging how busy someone looked and started measuring how effective their output actually was.
Let's talk about the human element for a second, because the impact this restructuring had on the employees themselves was profound.
Yeah.
And healthcare burnout is at absolute crisis levels right now.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this wasn't just about stabilizing the bottom line. The huge surprise benefit here was employee morale. Yes. By recovering all that administrative capacity and shipping it to a dedicated remote team, the practice drastically reduced burnout for the local staff.
Because the chaos was gone.
Exactly. The in-office team no longer felt like they were drowning in competing priorities every single shift. They weren't going home feeling guilty that they rushed a sensitive patient interaction just because the billing queue was overflowing. They had clear, bounded responsibilities.
It is truly amazing what happens when you let people actually do the job they were hired to do, rather than expecting them to do 5 other jobs simultaneously.
It's a game changer.
But fixing the immediate bleeding is one thing.
Yeah.
How does a 90-day transition like this set an organization up for the future, like the long-term scalability?
Oh, it fundamentally changes their scalability. By separating the physical office space from their operational support capacity, they created a highly flexible business model. They completely decoupled their growth from their real estate.
Wait, explain that. If their patient volume doubles next year, what does that look like now versus what it would have looked like before?
So, before, if patient volume doubled, they would have had to hire, say, 3 new billing specialists, right?
Right.
But where do you put them? The front desk is full, the back office is totally full. They would have had to literally rent the office suite next door, knock down a wall, buy more desks, upgrade the break room, increase their heating and cooling bills.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's massive overhead.
Exactly. Now, they can scale their remote support team infinitely. They just provision 3 new software licenses and ship 3 encrypted laptops. They can handle double the patients without adding a single square foot of expensive commercial real estate.
Which is just a massive competitive advantage. But it also highlights a trap that so many organizations fall into when they start feeling the pain of growth. The sources actually point out a very specific ultimate mistake that practices make when trying to solve billing challenges. What is it?
The ultimate mistake is assuming that the answer to operational pain is always more people.
Just throw bodies at it.
Right. A practice feels the pain of delayed billing, so they throw money at the problem and hire 2 more local billing clerks. But if you add staff to an inefficient, undocumented workflow, you aren't solving the problem. You are just scaling the complexity.
You're just hiring more dishwashers to run around the dining room.
Exactly. Process optimization has to come first. You have to fix the workflow, document the system, and establish objective metrics before you add a single person to the workforce.
Okay, so what does this all mean? Let's pull this all together. If we distill everything we've explored from this 90-day case study, the key takeaway is that operational improvements absolutely do not demand larger, more expensive local teams.
Right.
They demand restructured workflows. They demand replacing unwritten rules with documented systems, like using those screen recordings to capture institutional knowledge. And they demand a complete psychological shift away from using physical presence as a proxy for productivity and moving toward objective, dashboard-driven metrics.
I couldn't have summarized it better. The future of healthcare administration isn't a bigger, more crowded back office. It is specialized, systems-driven remote support.
The organizations that thrive will be the ones that build a predictable machine that works quietly in the background, rather than just throwing warm bodies at a chaotic environment.
Exactly.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a lingering, somewhat controversial question to really mull over as you look at your own operations this week. If your organization's quality control relies entirely on the fact that a manager can physically see employees sitting at their desks, are you really managing a system, or are you just running an expensive babysitting service? Thank you so much for tuning into this deep dive. We look forward to exploring the next operational breakdown with you soon.
Thank you for listening to The Remote Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with other professionals who are building the future of work. To learn more about how Virtual Mojo helps businesses grow with highly trained virtual assistants and remote support teams, visit www.virtualmojo.com. For inquiries or collaborations, reach out to us at contact@virtualmojo.com. Until next time, keep building smarter systems and embracing the future of work.